be a good moment to kind of talk a little bit about our kaupapa today. That what we're intending to do is introduce some things that people who are viewing this can try in their own time and get some ideas and some resources that they might want to, you know, experiment with on their own, or also take into a therapeutic relationship. And we will give some resources at the end of where someone might go looking for that if that's what they want to do. And what we will introduce today are things that really are kind of safe to do just with yourself, you know. So knowing that that might look quite different if you went and saw a therapist who's there to help hold you if you're going into more serious material, you know, personal material that you want to explore in a therapeutic way. So, and Deborah's come up with a really lovely acronym that I'd like you to kind of share with us, Deborah, and then we will have a go at making some little modules so that you can pick and choose which bits that you might find useful on any particular day or time.
Well, the acronym is BRATS, B-R-A-T-S, and we will go through each of those letters and what they mean. But the essence of it is I wanted something that as a therapist, I could use really easily with the clients I was working with, and also wanted something as a human being that I could remember really easily when I started to run into situations of strife. And each of the letters has a range of meanings. All of them are derived from what Hilary's already talked about, is the evolving neuroscience that we're starting to lean into more and more around how it is that we can actually take care of ourselves in situations that might be stressful. And so they're quite stretchy. They can go right from a really simple sitting on the bus or in the supermarket and you're starting to feel a bit overwhelmed, and you sort of pick and choose one or two of them that work really well for you, and you can do them quietly in an imaginative, creative way, right the way through to a big, expansive, playful session. They also stretch across the continuum we often use within the creative arts of art as therapy. So something that doesn't undo you too much and that really is in the soothing zone, right the way through to a journey you might go on with a therapist in a session, leaning into, for example, some of the stuff that Hilary was talking about with regard to maybe you've got some personal trauma, some big stories on the go, and you want to really work on these. So this little acronym can actually have space for all of those. We're going to stay very much in the art as therapy, using the arts in a creative way with them. So what they refer to as the B, the main thing that B covers is breathing. And we know from the studies that have been done in terms of how the breath helps regulate our nervous system, that breath is really, really important when it comes to helping that body and the emotions and our soul and warua just settle down. So we'll play with that a little bit more. The R, really sort of two main things that R taps into. The one is rhythm, mainly because we know that we're very rhythmic beings right from the get-go. When we're just a couple of little cells floating around in our mom's amniotic fluid, we're getting the sway of her walking, we're getting the vroom, 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 vroom of her heartbeat. It is completely wired into how we relate to the world. We're born into a rhythmic world that cycles, that has seasons. We have day and night. Rhythm is part and parcel of who we are as beings, and using it in multiple ways can really help us settle. And creatively, rhythm sits in everything we do as creative arts therapists. So we'll play with that a bit more. The other aspect of the R is relationship. And that relating and connecting, we're mammals. We really need to interconnect with each other as beings. And we can actually borrow each other's nervous systems. So a mom and a little thing, or a primary caregiver and a little tyke, when it's just inside its own little body and it can't express itself, it's very interconnected with that caregiver's nervous system. That's how we're designed as mammals. And then we separate out and we forget how important it is to reconnect in sometimes. So connecting in with another being and moving with them, mirroring them, dancing, breathing together, making art together can be so healing. And even just reaching out with a text. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So those are the R's. A for the brats, activity and arting. Arting has come from our students as one of the terms that they use. They're going to go and do some arting. Okay, it's because we introduce them to gerunds, and that doing words are actually much nicer than fixed nouns. So we art and we're arting. So activity, we know that moving the body to the point where you're breathing and panting is actually really good for settling it back down. Gets those jangly nerves into a better position inside of us. And you can do that creatively in all sorts of gorgeous ways. We've just done a big dance off. So that's, blending with a rhythm. That's a fabulous way to do it. Or you can do all sorts of other creative things. We'll play with that a bit. And then, of course, the arts making. And you will see from what we do and how we've been talking, we're not talking about the grand event, the big fine art, I have to be talented and creative to do this. We're talking about using the creative process, that the arting itself is a doing, it's an ongoing thing. So we're looking at following the movement and following the energy and responding to what arises. The T has a couple of meanings. The first is temperature. We know that temperature is really closely related to emotional state. So if you're really activated, dropping the body's temperature is a fabulous way to settle yourself back into your own nervous system. Or you might be getting really cold. You might be getting quite shut down and numbed up. And then raising the body temperature is a really important thing to do. And that can be done very creatively as well. So we'll play with that a bit. T can also mean texture and tactility, tangibility, things that are tangible, that bring the senses in the body alive, the texture of things. So working with textures and imagining textures and using them physically is great. We activate our haptic sense, which goes straight into the brain and helps us soothe down. And then S, couple of things with the S. S is sensory, in the body, in those senses, really getting those senses alive, really activating them, including the sixth sense. So not just our 5 physical senses, but that more than, that something else, that soul sense, that wairua, that connection that we have that goes outside of our body to our ancestors, to the more than of the world we live in. S is also silly. It's nothing like a bout of really good belly laughing or doing something really, really crazy and silly to help you feel like you're part of the human race, that you're connected in, and that your nervous system can actually cope. And S is for soothing. So that sort of beautiful, calming, let's come back into myself and just be okay. So that's a sort of real gallop through of the different elements of BRATS. And as I said, you can use it for yourself. Not all of us connect into each of them equally. There may be 1 or 2 of those letters that really, really resonate for you and others that don't. So it's a good idea to play with each of them and then settle on the ones that really work for you, and then have them in your little back pocket, in your kete, to carry around with you, so that if you start to feel that sense of my body starting to tremble, I'm starting to get nerves bubbling in my tummy, my breath is getting short, my shoulders are going up, I'm feeling tension in my body, I'm starting to get really hot and anxious, maybe pull out one of the BRATS and have a little play and see if you can actually come back into yourself.
Okay, so what we're going to do is start with the B. But what we thought we would do is do some getting in our bodies first, because that's a key element. And I'm just going to mention that I have this big cast on my arm, which is making my movement a little bit different to normal, but I will try my best, and everybody else can do the movement as well. So those of you who are watching might get some different ideas of how different bodies move and how maybe people with past casts move as well. So if you have the space to stand up, you can stand up and move away from your screen, and just take a little moment to feel the ground under your feet, and just notice your breathing right now. Don't change it, just notice what your breath is doing right now. And maybe use your feet just a little bit, place your feet just kind of at hip width, so that you have a nice firm foundation, not too wide, not too narrow, just underneath your hips. And I'd like you to bounce your knees a little bit. And the image I sometimes use is those toy dogs that used to be in the backs of cars that had a little spring in their neck. So you can feel as though when you're bouncing your knees, your head just is nice and loose on top of your spine. You can take a few good breaths while you're doing this, have a little wriggle, anything that feels nice, and then come back to rest on what I call soft knees. And what I mean by soft knees is you can lock your knees really hard, and then you can bend them, and then you can find a position which is somewhere between those, where your knees are straight and yet they're soft in the back. And that helps your whole spine. You can just lock your knees again and just feel what your spine are breathing. doing, how your spine and your breathing feel when your knees are locked. I'll say that again. And then make your knees soft and see if that makes a difference to your spine, how you're holding yourself. And your knees, given the conversation we've had, your knees are very connected to your adrenal glands. So we all know what it's like to have our knees go to jelly when we're nervous, and how we might lock them up if we're wanting to stand our ground. And it's often just really useful to just remind yourself to keep your knees soft, and that allows you to move in any direction and be very limber and able to be flexible in your body and the rest of your body. We often don't think about that very much. So what we're going to do next is work our keeping our knees soft. Just give our hands a bit of a shake. You can do both. I can only do one. And just loosen up your wrists and maybe flick your fingers a little bit and keep attending to your breathing, and then shake your elbows out. And your elbows are a bit like your knees. They can get all kind of locked up and tight. And then with one of your arms, give it a good shake so that it's flicking out through the ends of your fingers. And you might even throw your breath out with your arm. And then try your other one. And then when you're ready to, you can just let your arms just hang by your sides, nice and loose. And if it helps you to shut your eyes to tune into what they're feeling like, you can do that just to notice any sensations. And then open your eyes just gently so you can keep your balance more easily. You can hang on to something if you like, and lift one of your legs and give your foot a little bit of a shake so your ankle wobbles, and then flop your knee open without jarring it. And you can use your arms to help keep your balance. Go up into your hip and shake it all about so that you can feel that ball and socket joint of your hip moving about. And then we're going to do our other leg. Transfer your weight over. Just notice if it's easier or harder to keep balance on this side. And then go right up into your hip and shake it all about. And then one to the other a few times, just to get your balance again on those nice soft knees, feet hip width apart. And taking a good breath in and out. And then we're just going to do something in our spine just to warm our spine up. And I'm going to turn side on so you can see mine. You're going to just drop your head forward, keeping those knees soft. Breathe into the back of your neck. Just gently bring your head back up on top of your spine. Feel that. And then you're going to do it again, dropping your head forward, dropping your arms forward, letting your knees bend so your whole body is just curling over. And have a little bit of a wriggle and a shake. Press into the ground with your feet and roll yourself back up, letting your knees unbend as your body unbends. Think of yourself as a koru unfurling until your head's the last thing that comes up, and you can imagine the crown of your head has a string coming up, attaching you up to sky, te rangi, okay. And then just standing, feeling yourself standing. Often in therapeutic language, you might hear the words being centered or being grounded. So I'm hoping that by feeling into your spine, where it's sitting in your body, you might literally feel your center. And what we're going to do now that we're moving into the breathing a little bit more consciously, is we're going to take one step forward. So you've got one foot in front of you, one foot behind you. And I want you to tap the leg that's behind with the same arm, and you're just going to swing it backwards and forwards and look at your hand as you swing. And just see if you can notice that your weight naturally transfers from one foot to the other as your arm swings. And your arm has a natural weight and momentum. So you don't have to make this happen. It will happen all by itself once you've started. And I'd like you to take a breath in on the back swing while your ribs are nice and open, and out on the forward swing. So now you've got a rhythm to attach your breath to. So we've got our second letter joining into our first letter. And you can let this one gradually stop, and you can change legs and join your other arm in. So one of the things, I'm not going to do this arm, you can just do this arm. So you're letting it to start to swing, let your head turn and look at the arm as it goes backwards and forwards, and breathing in on the back swing if you can, and out on the forward swing. So one of the things that people find difficult to regulate their breathing. It's because breathing's an automatic thing. It's hard to bring it into our conscious control, and we might think about our breathing for about 3 breaths and then we go back to thinking about something else. So attaching it to a rhythm in your body is really, really helpful, because that helps the breath have something to attach itself to. And you can let your arm just gradually return to your side and just feel yourself now. You might be a bit looser. This movement that we've just done is basically standing still version of walking. So when we walk, and you could try walking around your space a little bit, letting your arms swing, is that just helps our rhythmic walking of our arms swinging, helps our legs swing forward and helps our spine gently rotate as we're walking. You can walk forwards and back and just allow yourself to kind of loosen yourself up. And what we might do is move on to Wendy explaining how we might use our body in a rhythmic way to make a shape that we can either draw or move.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So the lemniscate is a really interesting shape. It's like a figure 8, so that you can do in many different ways. You can use a pen on a piece of paper and be creating this figure 8 shape, and it can be vertical or horizontal. You can get both hands going, crossing over, and you can do really big movements and be breathing and using sound at the same time. You can bring your imagination in. Where are you? What space are you moving through? Then swap over your hands and arms and feel how difficult or easy it is to use your non-dominant arm. What's happening there? Does it know? What does our dominant arm know that our non-dominant doesn't? I often imagine too that I'm ice skating and I'm doing the lemnis. So it's that. And you can go up really high and bend right down in your knees, right down to the floor. Move 2 arms together. And imagine that you're an animal or some kind of serpent or moving creature. And if you don't have paint, you might be working in a group and you can use a paintbrush. So a paintbrush, and you imagine creating, and it's like a conductor.
I was noticing how the rhythms start to interweave, and how we start to mirror each other and pick that up. And I was wondering if we could play with that a little bit, maybe using our hands and a sort of sense of movements around and mirroring each other. And maybe have a little play with that game that you can play, where one person is leading and another person takes over, and we follow whoever happens to be leading at any given time. So does anybody want to start for us?
You're starting, Deborah.
Okay, I'm starting. And I'm loving noticing how within that rhythm and relationship band of the R's, there's space for both copying, mimicking, mirroring someone else, as well as variation. And that lovely coming together in resonance and then moving apart, still connected, but with space. And that's really what so much of this is about, is how to be connected, but at the same time make space or find space to lean into our own creativity and our own imagination.
I think something we were talking about earlier was a really lovely relationship between that ability to mirror and to building relationship, that ability to notice and attune and nod when somebody else is speaking. And, so it's that non-verbal language that we talk about, where we can attune to another person and feel understood and be understanding of them. It's such an important element in our relating.
Yeah.
Helena, I think you were about to say something.
I just think that the beauty of being in a relationship is that we can be ourselves, that we can bring ourselves to the relationship as we are. We can bring our whakapapa, we can bring our backstories, we can be that, and we can be in relationship with another human being. And when then we start to do this responding responsiveness, and then that with a group of people, I really love that exercise, because I was seeing the one-handedness of Amanda, and then out of the corner of my eye the movement of Wendy, and then Angie, and so it was, and Hillary and Deborah. So it was this, it starts off there, but then something catches my eye, and something in me responds to it, and then I follow, or I imitate, but it's still me, it's still mine. I still have agency.
Yeah.
Which is really lovely then, isn't it? When you were talking about that sense then of having agency, Helena, and that idea of then initiating. So having that sense that I can initiate, and there will be a response to that. Others will see it and respond to it. And I can make some choices about that. So that capacity to be able to initiate is really wonderful, and to be able to develop that, my range of that what I can offer. So I'm really curious, and we've talked about relationship with others, and then I think we almost fall back into really having that opportunity to look at our relationship with our own self, and so that we can go forth and do that in a way that feels good and enjoyable and safe, that we feel grounded in doing that. And I have to say, I had a little thought. And I realized I've got a mirror here beside me, and I haven't done it before. I mean, I was curious. Of course, ballerinas, ballet dancers, they dance and they get to watch themselves. And I was curious then about this idea of doing your movement on your own and being witness to your own self. And for some of us, that might be hard to look straight in and gaze straight into, and maybe you have a little play. But if you haven't got anyone else around, you could have a little start there. How am I?
And that reminds me, Angie, that a lot of what I've done in my creative life is to make videos, to see myself moving and to be able to see myself over time, look back at how I've been moving, or find an environment to move in that is a metaphor for what is going on for me, and then be able to see myself in that environment, and then I can add music or whatever. So it's a way of a self-portrait that I can express myself. So that's a really beautiful point of our relationship with ourselves, is often by witnessing ourselves, not necessarily needing another person to witness us. But if we video it, then we can actually show it to a trusted person if we want to help, to help us see ourselves. So sometimes I share mine with others, and then they reflect back what they saw, which is a really beautiful sharing as well.
And linking that into the idea we spoke about earlier of externalization, because that really is what the creative arts therapies is about moving things outside of the body for a while so that we can see them more clearly, and then moving them back into the body. So these are just other forms, because sometimes it's in making an art form, sometimes it's in using the body. And if you can't see your whole body because you're occupying it, watching it in the mirror or filming it, or even just putting on a Zoom and watching yourself I caught myself looking at myself in that as well. I was seeing my own hands go, and you know, and that sort of relationship you form with yourself, which is so lovely.
And for me, it felt like a power source. So it wasn't having a verbal conversation. You know, I loved that spaciousness we gave, you know, to our mouths to be still, and for that sound to be thick, and for this beautiful thick light to sort of come out here and meet each other. I mean, you could feel that. And for me, it awakened the hands to have a conversation. And working with others, how are we going to communicate today? What are our communication devices? And that can be something, you know, we're wearing or carrying, or a body part, and then it leads us into what can we do with these. So a beautiful warm-up and opener, Hilary.
It shows how powerful it is, that even like how natural this is to us, that even through this phenomenon of Zoom, we can be having the type of, you know, experiences that you're describing there, of light and connection, even through these little boxes.
It just makes me think of one of the another sort of, I'm the acronym queen, or, you know, forming little models to make things easy to remember. One of the ones that I've used all along is the idea of the head, heart, hands, and the holy bit. So the 4 H's, and just to make sure that I'm addressing different aspects of the self, and the hands being, for me, what remind me of action and taking, being active, being engaged, doing things, the doingness of self, and the other parts are self-explanatory as well. But it loops me back into that idea of agency. And I'm just wondering, we didn't have agency as part of our A's for the breaths, and it needs to be there, because really, isn't this so much of what we're doing all about? Is about restoring agency to those who've lost it for whatever reason, who feel disempowered in their own bodies, souls, lives, social relationships, encounters with the world, encounters with self. That agency has leaked away in whatever shape or form it is, and we're trying to restore that. So really, the creative act, the activity, the rhythm, the relationship, the breathing, the making art, the dropping of temperature or raising of temperature, the getting involved with texture, the getting into the senses, the soothing and the silliness, are all about restoring agency. And that responsibility, people's ability to respond responsibly to themselves and to their world. Sorry, Angie.
No, I was just going to say, I think following on from what we're saying is this birthright that we had, this birthright that we came with, our capacity to play, to dance, to and enact things, to just be spontaneous there, is so very quickly squashed. So you'll hear people who say, "Oh, but I can't dance. Oh, but I can't paint." You know, it is such a thing. It's such a common theme, that this idea, as you say, restoring our belief in our capacity, that is an inherent ability, and it's just finding it, opening some little doors to let it poke out and see what it can do. But
can I just take this opportunity to kind of round off B and R, because you know, so is there any more B's that we, you know, any more breathing tips? I mean, there are lots around, you know, so that's the thing. I don't think we need to, you know, it's out there, you know, breath is talked about a lot. So I'm just wondering whether we move on to A.
I want to just quickly toss in two, or actually 3 tiny little ones that I used a lot during the earthquakes, particularly with children, because for them, slowing down and hum breathing not going to work. So I used to make sure that all the kids I worked with had a pocket full of balloons, because if they started to get activated or stressed, their school teacher would know so-and-so is going to draw out their balloons, and they would blow up a balloon or two, because that act of drawing in the breath and then blowing it slowly into something brightly colored that then fills your range of vision, and of course making the fart noises and letting it go around the room really helps. So that's a great breathing one for kids. Bubbles, blowing bubbles and playing with the bubbles, fabulous for kids. And the other thing we used to do is make a breathing square. And we called it square breathing. So 5 blocks, 5 on each side, and you make a little critter. Here's one of my little square breathing critters. So a little creature that can take a little journey around a board. So that's a really fun thing to do with a kid. And then you've got the board with all the colored squares, and they breathe in for 5 as they go tick, 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 and they hold and they breathe out. And just taking the little critter around the board, a lot of mums found that really great. They'd take it home and they'd have it as a bedtime soothing, or if there was activation, they would bring out the little critter and you would take a little journey around the board. So just some really simple things to do with wee ones.
And as you mentioned, Deborah, and as I was saying, that it is really hard to kind of concentrate on our breathing for more than a few breaths. So having something to attach it to, a movement or an activity, something rhythmic, helps us, even if it's just walking. But there are also apps you can get on your phone that help you watch a shape going in and out or something like that, just to assist that ability to focus on the breath and really take the time to slow it down and you know, calm the whole nervous system.
Right, so it seems like we've got to the letter A, and we're looking for arting, we're looking for activity. And we're looking to get a little bit perhaps enlivened in some of that. So we're going to start with a little bit of a warm-up. So we're going to have a little game together just to get us going. And that game is called Yes Let's, and it's a theatre game, and it's often used in drama therapy. So we're going to take turns and we're going to call out a little activity to do. And everybody's going to join in and say, yes, let's, a sense of we are going to do this together. All right, so let's just see how we go. All right, ready, here we go. Have your little space. Be ready. Yeah. All right. Oh, okay. So we're ready. And when you've had enough, you can take over. Call something out. All right. So here it goes. All right. Let's all jump on a pogo stick.
Yes, let's.
Let's all eat something disgusting.
Oh, yes, let's. Let's all scratch our heads.
Yes, let's.
Let's all be pufferfish.
Yes,
let's.
So now our temperature is right up there. So we've done a bunch of the activity stuff, and we know from the studies that have been done that getting yourself really active and getting your breathing up and also being a bit silly really helps down regulate that sympathetic nervous system and upregulate the parasympathetic nervous system so that you can actually be a lot more centered in yourself. But now the temperature is up, and for a lot of people, raised temperature means activation of stress. What do we do now?
My thought is to go to pure, to have water, but I really liked what we were talking about before, Dee, at another time when we were talking about if we can't do that, then how can we call on our imagination to activate that cooling response? And so I'll see myself at the sea. I'll see myself at the sea, and it's in the morning, and it's cold, and I feel the waves come lap up to my feet, and I'll see myself get in a little bit more, and it comes up to my knees, and you know, when it hits those parts that send the chills all through me, and then going in deeper and deeper to when I'm floating and the sea has my weight and it's cool and fresh. And what that does, it actually activates that cooling sensation in my body.
That's is another thing that's been quite well researched, is that our imagination has a huge impact upon the physicalization and the way in which our body and our somatic experiences can be altered. So if we feel into and allow our imagination to come to life, just like your beautiful visualization took all of us on this journey with you, and we were imagining our own water and our own bodies and our own beautiful, cool, sparkly experience lying on our backs in that cool water, and your body then starts to believe that and actually starts to respond physically to it.
Yeah. And I often find myself, when I'm with clients, if they're trying to describe a state, like an emotional state, I ask them, well, what's the, if you were to make a sculpture of it, what material would it be? And what temperature would it be? Is it cold? Is it hot? Because then we can use our imaginations to see if we can find some kind of other way of thinking about it, So yeah, that use of the imagination is really key, and metaphor, finding a way, something that will remind us, so water can be a metaphor also for emotions, like being able to surrender to floating, like you talked about, Helena, of just surrendering to those feelings and letting them support you. Beautiful.
Sometimes just making, I've just while you were talking, Amanda, I just made a really quick little capturing that in something visual. Can be so simple to do. It's taken me 15 seconds, 20 seconds to make something that for me captures a feeling of that cool water. And I'll often invite clients to do a similar thing, and they'll take a photograph. They might take it and put it up at home so they can look at it whenever they feel activated, or they can take a photograph on their mobile phone. And if they feel activated, they can do the visualization as well as look at the image. And then they've got a whole layering of the sensory awakening towards that cool temperature.
And I'd just like you to comment a little bit, Deborah, also, or somebody else, about your choice of materials there, because that was really particular to the feeling that you were trying to embody by doing that action with your hands. So do you want to talk a little bit, we can have a very small conversation in terms of time, but about how different materials can activate different states of feeling?
Well, I'll just talk particularly about these ones, and then somebody else can take it from there. I chose the pastels. These are chalk pastels, and they're very smooshy and they're a bit messy, and they don't make sharp edges, because what I needed to feel in that flow of the water is the fluidity, the rocking that we all did when Helena was talking. We were all rocking our bodies and we were feeling that calming, soothing rhythm. And that for me is closely associated with cooler temperatures, being in the water, and the materials smudge across the page. If you look, I can actually make them smudge into each other. And so there's something about the fluidity, and also in a way the fact that I can't control it hugely, that it does things, it gets on me and it leaves a trace behind, and there's something about that is playing with uncertainty, that gives me a place to play with, not being fully in control and yet at the same time having agency. That lovely paradox of, I've got agency, I'm making an image, but I'm not controlling the image. I'm not making it do what I want it to do. I'm surrendering. So that idea of surrendering again. So the materials were actually my companion in exploring that felt sense of what was being evoked in that visualization. And Wendy, you were talking about...
Yeah, I was going to say you could take it even further in that direction if you had paint or wet paint on wet paper, where it would get even less controllable and more like the experience, if you had that available. Sorry, Wendy, what were you saying?
I was just going to say with the clay,
Yeah, so I've been playing with just this modeling clay for the whole time. So for me, it gives my hands, which is my voice, something to do and to be part of. And so with the modeling clay, it's just a little bit of resistance, but not a lot. and it's very malleable, and it takes the temperature of my hands, which are now very warm, and then I can put it to the side and it can cool off, and then I can cool down. And then I can pick it up again. So we don't need to be entirely intermodal and using lots of different materials. If this feels good, what do we know about it? What can we learn? How can we use it? How will we one together? Yeah.
Beautiful.
So we've slipped and started to merge temperature and tangibility, the texture, the tactility of using our hands for things. Angie, you had some clay as well.
I had a little bit of clay, but I'm also aware, you talked about sharp edges, and I'm just wondering, Deborah, whether sometimes that tactile, even just having something that you are just, that might have a sharp edge, that just brings us down in a different way. It's almost that sense of that mindfulness, how we talk about being mindful, the coming into the creating, brings us down into focus, and that in itself really helps drop our temperature. Let that go, whatever that was out there. All I have to concentrate on is this little bit, and I can just fiddle, tactile, touch, feel, corner, and I'm here.
And I see, Helena, you've got a sharp thing, or a thing from nature that has one sharp end, that you're playing with.
Yeah, it just and like, because I'm such an ocean girl, I have these things around in my room that I can do this when I'm in a situation. I can reach and do this without and how, like, the points, Angie, the points sort of have you just come to that space, focus in, quieten down, settle in. But it also has these amazing ridges as well, and so my fingers become my eyes, and my fingers just help to bring me back, and then I can be back in the conversation. If I've gotten dysregulated, I can then calm myself quietly down, and then I can be back in the conversation again. No one has to know.
It's lovely. There's a real theme emerging, which we didn't mention at the beginning, because so often some of the most obvious stuff is so close that you're swimming in it, you don't even notice it, is the nowness, the here and nowness of so much of what we do. Is we tend not to be a psychotherapeutic approach that is about trawling through the past and looking at the old stories. We're very interested in how the stories are alive in our bodies now. And we often run away from that. We distract ourselves when we're in stressed states. We don't want to inhabit our own bodies because they feel difficult to be part of, and our emotions are troubling. And yet we do actually need to be here. This is where we can heal. And so having the arts and having those practices that bring us into this here and now, this moment now, this unfolding of it, so important. And the ridges on a shell are just such a beautiful metaphor for that, of each little one being a moment in the now. So we've sort of transitioned into the S, haven't we? In the sensory and the soothing.
Right, 5 minutes never went so fast. It didn't go so fast. I hope you're calm. I can see you. You're beautifully mindful, and things are just emerging and happening. See if you can make some words emerge. Drop them out of you. Let them fall onto the paper. Some words, a little sentence of something. It doesn't need to make a lot of sense. Just see what comes from what you've done. A little sentence. So I'm wondering if perhaps we share what we have done and read your line, and let's see if it just follows organically to make some kind of creative story, some kind of reflection on sensory. It bubbles and baubles on a summer's day. The sun is out. It's called to play.
When words are shredded and my senses come out to play.
Water, finger, paper, paint, move with breath and light.
Uplift, collect, unfold.
He koro wai aroha e awhi awhi ana hau.
Looking at the ups and downs and all the colours in between.
Lovely.
Vitoi, mauri ora.